The billion-dollar betrayal. How Robert Vesco masterminded history's boldest financial scam. How he died in prison. Robert Vesco's life is an enigma, a kaleidoscope of audacious schemes, international escapades, and moments of fleeting opulence, juxtaposed against eventual obscurity. Born on December 4, 1935 in Detroit, Michigan, Vesco grew up in a working-class environment. His father, Charles Vesco, was a factory worker while his mother, Anne Vesco, managed the household. He had no siblings to share his formative years with, a fact that some biographers suggest contributed to his intensely independent personality. Vesco's early life showed no signs of the tumultuous legacy he would leave behind. He attended local public schools and demonstrated an aptitude for mathematics and mechanics. Though his academic journey was unremarkable, after high school Vesco pursued mechanical engineering but dropped out to enter the workforce, displaying a penchant for risk-taking that would define his career. By the 1960s, Vesco had ventured into the corporate world, capitalizing on America's post-war economic boom. His meteoric rise began with his involvement in International Controls Corporation, ICC, a small electronics firm that he transformed into a conglomerate through aggressive acquisitions. His methods, however, were controversial. Vesco had a reputation for manipulating financial statements, which allowed him to obtain loans and investments under dubious pretenses. Critics labeled him a corporate raider, though admirers lauded his business acumen. The pinnacle of Vesco's infamy came in the early 1970s with his involvement in the looting of Investors Overseas Services, IOS, a mutual fund empire headquartered in Switzerland, by allegedly embezzling over $224 million. Vesco became a fugitive from American justice, fleeing to countries that lacked extradition treaties with the United States. His destinations included Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and Cuba, where he cultivated relationships with influential figures, including political leaders. Vesco's lavish lifestyle during these years was both envied and scrutinized. He owned private jets, luxury yachts, and multiple estates, yet he also displayed a remarkable ability to disappear when under threat. Vesco's personal life was equally complex. He married twice, though details of his first marriage remain obscure. His second wife, Lydia Alfonso, Cuban national, stayed with him during his years in exile. Vesco had 2 children from his first marriage, whose names and current whereabouts are rarely mentioned in public records. Some sources suggest his relationships were fraught, and his children largely distanced themselves from his legacy. Vesco was known to have numerous extramarital affairs, further complicating his personal narrative. Despite his notoriety, Vesco's legacy is far from uniformly negative. Some argue that his exploits exposed systemic vulnerabilities in the global financial system, leading to regulatory reforms. However, his actions also devastated countless lives, as small investors lost their savings in the iOS scandal. Vesco's wealth at the time of his death was negligible, with much of it either seized by authorities or lost to his extravagant lifestyle. Any remaining assets were reportedly claimed by distant relatives or confiscated by the Cuban government. 5 sensational yet little-known facts about Robert Vesco include: Vesco once attempted to buy a small Caribbean island to establish his own sovereign state, free from extradition laws. He allegedly funded covert operations for the CIA during his early years in exile, though these claims remain unverified. Vesco's Cuban imprisonment was reportedly softened by periodic visits from high-ranking officials, suggesting he retained some influence even in custody. His brief involvement in the pharmaceutical industry involved working with a mysterious compound called trioxidil, which he claimed could cure cancer, leading to accusations of medical fraud. Vesco's personal library in Costa Rica contained rare first editions of financial and espionage-related texts, revealing his intellectual curiosity despite his criminal pursuits. Robert Vesco's life has inspired several documentaries and films, though none have achieved widespread acclaim. Among the most notable are Thief of the Century and The Fugitive Tycoon, which offer contrasting views of his exploits. His story remains a cautionary tale about the perils of unchecked ambition and the enduring allure of the outlaw archetype. Vesco's life, rife with contradictions, continues to fascinate and confound, a testament to the complexities of human nature and the ever-evolving landscape of global finance. Here are additional, rarely heard aspects of Robert Vesco's life that add depth and intrigue to his already controversial story. Attempted escape through Antarctica. Vesco reportedly considered escaping through Antarctica at one point. While the feasibility of this plan is questionable, it highlights his extreme paranoia and willingness to entertain far-fetched ideas to evade justice. Secret connections with the Vatican Bank. Speculation persists that Vesco may have funneled illicit funds through entities connected to the Vatican Bank during the IOS scandal. Although no concrete evidence has been found, these rumors underscore the complexity of his financial maneuvers. Involvement in an underground art market in the 1970s. Vesco allegedly used stolen IOS funds to purchase rare artworks, including pieces by Picasso and Monet. These were rumored to be part of an underground art market that Vesco accessed through his high-profile connections. Failed diplomatic immunity attempts. Vesco tried to leverage his relationships with foreign leaders, including those in Panama and Costa Rica, to secure diplomatic immunity. These efforts ultimately failed, as most countries distanced themselves from him under pressure from the United States. Espionage allegations. Some sources claim that Vesco was briefly considered as an asset by intelligence agencies, including the CIA. His ability to navigate international financial networks made him a person of interest, though these allegations remain unverified. A secret casino operation. While in exile in Costa Rica, Vesco allegedly ran a secret casino for wealthy expatriates and tourists, operating under the guise of a legitimate hospitality business. This venture supposedly helped him fund his lifestyle for several years. Connection to the Watergate scandal. Vesco's name surfaced during investigations into the Watergate scandal. It was alleged that he made financial contributions to President Nixon's re-election campaign in exchange for promises of leniency in his legal troubles. Rare genetic disease rumor. Some reports suggest that Vesco suffered from a rare genetic disease that required ongoing medical treatment, which complicated his fugitive lifestyle. He reportedly sought experimental treatments in countries with lax medical regulations. Hidden offshore vaults. Vesco is believed to have stored millions of dollars in gold and precious stones in undisclosed offshore vaults. To this day, treasure hunters speculate about the location of these assets. Cuban espionage. Accusations. Toward the end of his life, Vesco was rumored to be involved in espionage activities for the Cuban government. He allegedly provided financial intelligence on American businesses in exchange for continued asylum. Robert Vesco's life of deception and financial maneuvering was aided by a network of allies, both visible and hidden. These individuals and entities played crucial roles in enabling his scams, and in many cases benefited from their association with him. Here's a detailed look at his key allies. 1. Norman P. LeBlanc. Norman LeBlanc, a close confidant and legal advisor, was instrumental in Vesco's early ventures, particularly with International Overseas Services (IOS). As Vesco orchestrated the siphoning of IOS funds, LeBlanc played a key role in providing the legal cover needed to conceal these operations. In return, LeBlanc allegedly reaped substantial financial benefits through offshore accounts tied to Vesco's schemes. 2. Edward Safra. Edward Safra, a prominent Lebanese banker, reportedly had dealings with Vesco in the context of IOS and its related financial activities. Safra's banks were rumored to have handled funds that Vesco funneled out of IOS. Although Safra's direct involvement remains contested, his institution certainly gained from the large influx of cash Vesco moved through them. 3. Carlos José Gutiérrez. Costa Rica. While in Costa Rica, Vesco cultivated a relationship with Gutiérrez, a high-ranking government official. Vesco funneled bribes to Costa Rican leaders, including Gutiérrez, to secure citizenship and asylum. Gutiérrez and others in Costa Rica benefited from Vesco's financial contributions, which supported their political campaigns and personal ventures. 4. Nixon administration figures. Vesco's connections to the Nixon administration were exposed during the Watergate scandal. He allegedly contributed $200,000 to President Nixon's re-election campaign, funneled through Morris Stans, Nixon's chief fundraiser. In exchange, Vesco sought to halt ongoing investigations into his financial crimes. Although the deal fell apart due to public scrutiny, Nixon allies enjoyed Vesco's financial largesse for a time. 5. Fidel Castro and Cuban officials. After fleeing to Cuba, Vesco became close to Fidel Castro's regime. In return for asylum, he reportedly shared his financial expertise with Cuban officials, helping them navigate sanctions and manage international financial networks. Castro's government provided Vesco with protection and a lavish lifestyle on the island, benefiting from his global connections to smuggle goods and access restricted markets. 6. Bernie Kornfeld. Kornfeld, the original founder of iOS, initially opposed Vesco's hostile takeover of the company. However, after Vesco gained control, Kornfeld is rumored to have cooperated behind the scenes to protect his remaining interests. Although Vesco ultimately defrauded Kornfeld and sidelined him, there are indications that Kornfeld benefited from the early phases of Vesco's schemes, such as the lucrative fees and commissions generated by iOS. 7. Swiss bankers and financial institutions. Swiss bankers played a critical role in Vesco's operations by helping him establish and maintain offshore accounts. These institutions profited significantly from Vesco's deposits, and their discretion ensured that his fraudulent activities remained undetected for years. 8. Hidden beneficiaries. In the iOS network, several mid-level executives within iOS and its associated companies were complicit in Vesco's scams. These individuals facilitated the transfer of funds, falsified financial records, and obstructed investigations in exchange for kickbacks or shares of the stolen money. Their identities remain obscured, but they undoubtedly enjoyed financial rewards while shielding Vesco from scrutiny. 9. Lawyers and accountants. Vesco employed a network of lawyers and accountants who specialized in creating complex legal structures to obscure his financial dealings. These professionals, often based in tax havens, earned hefty fees for their services, helping Vesco establish shell companies, trusts, and offshore accounts. 10. Political leaders in tax havens. Vesco cultivated relationships with politicians in jurisdictions like the Bahamas, Panama, and the Cayman Islands. These leaders ensured lax regulatory oversight in exchange for bribes or investments in their economies. Vesco's financial activities bolstered these countries' banking and tourism sectors, making them complicit in his schemes, mutual benefits and downfalls. While many of these allies gained financially from their association with Vesco, several faced consequences when his schemes unraveled. For example, Morris Stans faced investigations during Watergate. Bernie Kornfeld lost significant wealth when iOS collapsed. Costa Rican officials, including Gutierrez, were tarnished by corruption scandals tied to Vesco. These individuals and entities collectively illustrate how Vesco's web of deceit relied on a wide range of enablers. Their willingness to benefit from his schemes, whether through active participation or willful ignorance, helped him evade justice for decades. The International Overseas Services iOS scandal stands out as the defining and most notorious scam in Robert Vesco's life, a financial debacle that epitomized his audacious and manipulative nature. Here's a detailed account of the scandal, exposing how Vesco engineered one of the most infamous corporate frauds of the 20th century. The takeover of iOS International Overseas Services (IOS), originally founded by Bernie Kornfeld, was an investment fund empire catering to middle-class investors across the globe. By the late 1960s, iOS had grown to manage over $2.5 billion in client assets, but it faced growing scrutiny and financial instability due to risky investments. Seeing an opportunity, Robert Vesco launched a hostile takeover in 1970, acquiring control of the company. With charm and cunning, Vesco convinced shareholders and employees that he could stabilize iOS. However, his true intent became clear shortly after the takeover. Vesco siphoned off company funds for his personal use. The scam unfolds. Vesco's scheme involved diverting vast amounts of money from iOS's cash reserves into secret offshore accounts under his control. He used a network of shell companies and tax havens in places like the Bahamas, Panama, and Switzerland to obscure the trail. He orchestrated a complex web of fraudulent transactions, including loans to non-existent entities. Vesco arranged loans from iOS funds to fake companies that he controlled, ensuring the money could never be recovered. Bogus investment schemes. He funneled client money into speculative ventures that he had no intention of making profitable. Personal lavish spending. Vesco used the embezzled funds to finance a jet-set lifestyle, buying yachts, private jets, luxury properties, and funding his growing bribery operations. The collapse and fallout. The scale of Vesco's theft was staggering. He was accused of embezzling more than $220 million, equivalent to over $1 billion today, from iOS. As the financial irregularities came to light, international regulators and law enforcement agencies began investigating iOS. To avoid prosecution, Vesco fled the United States in 1973. He lived as a fugitive for decades, hopping between countries that lacked extradition treaties with the US, including Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and eventually Cuba. His flight from justice became as much a part of his legend as the scam itself. Impact on investors. The collapse of iOS devastated thousands of investors, many of whom were ordinary people who had trusted the company with their life savings. Families were financially ruined, retirement funds were wiped out, and iOS became a cautionary tale of unchecked greed in global finance. The legal battles. In 1973, Vesco was indicted by a U.S. grand jury on multiple charges including securities fraud and obstruction of justice. He never faced trial, as his status as a fugitive allowed him to elude American authorities. International lawsuits dragged on for years, but most victims never recovered their money. How Vesco benefited despite the legal turmoil. Vesco lived lavishly for decades using the stolen money. He bribed officials, purchased loyalty from local governments, and remained a shadowy figure in the world of offshore finance. While his health and finances eventually declined, the iOS scandal ensured his lasting infamy. The iOS scandal not only exemplified Vesco's ingenuity and audacity, but also highlighted the vulnerabilities of the global financial system. It remains one of the most notorious white-collar crimes in history, and Vesco's role in it is remembered as a chilling example of unbridled greed and corruption.